It was frightening for the officer to approach. There was no way of knowing what he would find. The inside of the room was filled with a faint noise. There was a faint tapping sound as if something was being hit from within. It could be anything, right? A rat infestation? A person? Taking care not to wake up their neighbors, they approached cautiously. The situation could be dangerous. Melissa Grams led a busy life while she was a young woman. In addition to working at a local restaurant, she was also studying at a community college at the age of 24. The girl was known for her partying lifestyle, and her home life was anything but stable. Melissa was nevertheless very charismatic and endeared to many people because of her vibrant personality. A lot of people adored her. Melissa mysteriously disappeared one day. It is understandable that her friends and family were worried, and they searched high and low to find any evidence that she was alive. Initial investigations by the authorities failed to yield any results. Where could she have gone? It became increasingly difficult to find Melissa as time passed. Months passed, but she never showed up. There was no trace of her anywhere. A tip eventually led the authorities to believe that Melissa had been dating Kurt Black. They were looking for a clue, so could this be it? Upon checking Kurt's profile, they found out more about him. At first glance, Kurt appeared to be an ordinary 35-year-old man. However, the authorities decided to investigate further. What was the reason for his association with such a young woman? In an attempt to find some clues about Melissa's whereabouts, they obtained a warrant to search his home. In spite of their best efforts, they ended up empty-handed. Could they be missing something? Seeing little progress, Kurt's past was examined more closely by the authorities. Priors from his teenage years were found in some old records. The police discovered that he had a criminal record and that he had been in trouble with the law before. It was then they began to wonder whether Kurt had any connection to Melissa's disappearance. Detectives tried to get first-hand information from the couple. Was either of them ever seen in public together? On the night Melissa vanished, Kurt had been seen arguing with Melissa. Their suspicions were raised. "We have eyewitnesses," the detective said. Nevertheless, Kurt denied being involved in Melissa's disappearance, and there was no concrete evidence that linked him to the crime. "I'm innocent," Kurt responded. Over the course of several months, the investigation reached a conclusion. Melissa's whereabouts were not known, and authorities had exhausted all leads. It was unclear to her friends and family what had happened to her and if they would ever discover the truth. Did she run away from home? Meanwhile, Kurt Black carried on as usual. No apparent remorse or guilt appeared to be evident as he went about his daily business. Yet he couldn't shake the feeling that the authorities were watching him, and he feared they would eventually catch up with him. The man looked suspicious. Although Kurt was afraid, he remained defiant. In response, he insisted that he had no involvement in Melissa's disappearance and that he was the victim of unfair prosecution by the authorities. In order to get the police off of his back, he had to take some action. His rights were violated during the investigation, according to the lawsuit he filed against the police department. Could that buy him a little more time? As Kurt's life spiraled out of control, the lawsuit was abandoned. In the end, he lost his home, his job, and even his sanity. It did not take him long to begin experiencing vivid nightmares and hallucinations, and he couldn't shake the feeling that Melissa was somewhere out there waiting for him. Was this all worth it? For her? He thought. He conducted his own investigation into Melissa's disappearance in a last-ditch effort to clear his name. In addition to scouting the town, he interviewed witnesses and even hired a private investigator. But even after all the effort he put into proving his innocence, he could not find any concrete proof. It was important that he showed that he had tried to find her. Kurt's hope began to fade as time passed. It became increasingly apparent to him that everyone around him was plotting against him, and he became increasingly isolated and paranoid. The state of his mind deteriorated further, and he eventually became reclusive, rarely leaving his home except to buy food and supplies. All he did was take out the trash at night. Then, one day, something miraculous happened. During a hike, a group of hikers came across a body. It was identified as Melissa Grams. In a flash, Kurt Black was arrested and accused of Melissa's murder by the authorities without hesitation. While he was arrested, Kurt screamed that he was innocent, but as a suspect, he could not say anything. A good cop and a bad cop game was being played by the detectives. Initially, Kurt refused to talk to anyone. A silent interrogation room surrounded him. In 6 hours, the detective returned and apologized. A smirk spread across Kurt's face as he stood up. "I told you I didn't do it," he said smugly. There was no indication that Kurt knew anything about Melissa's disappearance, and he denied having any involvement. In spite of this, the authorities wouldn't let him go unnoticed. Their eyes were on him. Melissa may have run away from home, but the authorities had no concrete evidence of her disappearance. Trying to find out what Kurt knew, they wanted more information on him. Kurt was tracked down by the authorities for days. Their pursuit of him led them to the grocery store. Throughout the day and into the night, they parked outside his house. The situation was getting out of hand. Kurt shut the window, thinking that they had been arrogant. They were parked right outside that night, so he couldn't take out the trash. It would be impossible for them to miss him walking around the corner. A dark environment was necessary for his stealth. Weeks passed, and Melissa was nowhere to be found. Kevin Jeffrey, a local jogger, gave them a tip-off just as the authorities were losing hope. As a result, he advised them to check Kurt's property again, but this time they should pay greater attention. There was no evidence of anything in Kurt's house, as the authorities had thoroughly searched it already. Exactly what did local jogger Kevin Jeffrey know? Kurt's property needed to be checked on the outside again. He tipped the authorities off. A thorough investigation was required. Initially, they saw nothing unusual when they went back. After that, Kevin pointed out the dumpster while jogging by. Their approach was cautious as they heard noises coming from it. Was the missing girl finally going to be found? It was a local jogger, Kevin, who came forward with the first clue. In the back of Kurt's property, he suggested they check again, and what they discovered stunned them. Fearful, the detective opened the dumpster lid, but it was sealed shut. It wouldn't open, no matter how hard he pulled. "That's strange," he said. The detective heard noises coming from the lid as he attempted to open it. What type of dumpster was this? It's supposed to be used for trash disposal, but how does it work? His colleagues approached it cautiously after he signaled them to do so. The contents surprised them. They didn't expect to find anything. There was a police presence around the dumpster. There was no end to the noises. There was no alternate entrance, despite the detectives' attempts. A fake dumpster was illegally parked there. They approached cautiously after hearing noises inside. They were shocked when they opened the door. Kurt knew what was in the dumpster, didn't he? In the dumpster, there was a small opening the detective discovered. The door was half open. The darkness made it difficult for him to see. It was necessary for him to crouch down in order to open it fully. When he pried the door open with his nails, the contents of the dumpster gave him a shock like no other. The body of a young girl was lying there. What happened to her? They were surprised to find Melissa alive and well inside the dumpster. With a bed, stove, and sink, it looked like a sealed fake dumpster. Melissa appeared to have lived there for quite some time. As she looked at the detective, she seemed comfortable. "What's going on here?" the detective said. "She's alive," he declared. Melissa was shocked that they had found her. It turned out that Kurt had converted the dumpster into a living space for her. Inside, there was cutlery, a blanket, and a lamp. Melissa had been hiding out there all along. A fight had broken out between her and her mother, and she had run away. She had been taken care of by Kurt. However, the authorities were unaware of this. According to them, Kurt kept her there against her will. The fake dumpster's door was opened, which shocked Melissa. Her stay there had lasted for weeks, and she was unsure of how long it would last. This living space was created for her because Kurt had an unusual love or obsession with her. Her trust in him was based on the fact she knew him from the restaurant where she used to work. There was even a rug and pillows inside the dumpster after it had been converted into a living space. Kurt had been caring for Melissa there, where she had been living. A dispute with her mother led her to run away. Since Kurt was such a kind-hearted person, he had taken her in and furnished her room. She offered an explanation, but would they accept it? Melissa was found alive, but the authorities were also concerned. In less than 30 square feet of space, they asked how she survived. "I don't take up much space anyways," she said to the female officer. Melissa's family was concerned about her safety and well-being since they couldn't believe anyone would live in a dumpster. She needed to be taken to the hospital for a checkup, and Kurt needed to be questioned further. Upon finding Melissa alive and well, the authorities were relieved but also puzzled. "How did you go to the bathroom?" the female officer asked her. "Across from the sewage drain." Melissa pointed to a tiny potty in the corner. Melissa's parents could not understand why Kurt had taken such great measures to keep her hidden. As Kurt cried and said, "Don't take away my love from me," they had many questions for him. As a result of the interrogation, Kurt finally admitted everything he had done. The opportunity to spend time with Melissa rose when she ran away from home, as he had been in love with her for years. His goal was to hide her from her family and the authorities by building a living space in the dumpster. I gave her food every night. Nobody ever saw me or noticed, so we managed to get away with it, he said sheepishly.